Hello and welcome to the Gaming Historian. The Game Gear, Sega's first handheld console. Released in North America in 1991, it was their answer to Nintendo's wildly popular Game Boy. It was supposed to be everything the Game Boy wasn't. It was a wider handheld with a color backlit screen. It also had quite a few accessories that Sega hoped would set the system over the top. It didn't. This is the story of the Sega Game Gear. In August of 1989, Nintendo released the Game Boy in North America with a retail price of $89.95. It was an immediate success. Stores could not keep the system in stock. In 1989, Nintendo shipped about 1 million Game Boys. It only met half the demand. By the end of the year, Nintendo was Japan's most profitable company. Competitors stood little chance. Atari released their handheld, the Lynx, in September of the same year, with a retail price of $199.99. It was the first handheld to feature a color screen. But many consumers felt it was too bulky and had poor battery life. Third-party game developers were not interested. Atari's now poor reputation and the Game Boy's popularity scared away retailers. NEC even had a handheld, the Turbo Express. It sold for a whopping $299 and also featured a color screen. It was essentially a portable TurboGrafx 16. The Turbo Express, while impressive, was just too expensive in the new handheld market. It seemed as if no one could top the Nintendo giant in handheld gaming. The closest competitor to Nintendo was Sega. The makers of the Genesis were about even with Nintendo in the video game market share during this time. Sega took notice of the Game Boy and answered it with a handheld of their own, the Game Gear. Codenamed Mercury, the system was designed to answer problems consumers had with the Game Boy. Some gamers complained Nintendo's handheld was awkwardly shaped. Sega made theirs wider and more comfortable to hold. The Game Boy had a green and black screen with no backlight. The Game Gear featured a color, backlit screen. It retailed for a reasonable $149.99. The Game Gear was essentially an updated Master System, which was Sega's home console before the Genesis. It featured a D-pad, 2 control buttons, and a start button. It also had built-in speakers and a headphone jack. The system also featured a power jack, so you could play it while it was plugged in. It came in a variety of colors, although some were exclusive to Japan, such as this Coca-Cola red version. The highlight of the Game Gear is the backlit screen. Sega focused on this for their advertising campaign. It's also comfortable to hold while you're playing. Another great thing about the Game Gear is that it's region-free, allowing you to play games from anywhere. However, the Game Gear was a battery hog. It took 6 AA batteries, and you would be lucky to get 4 hours of gameplay. Today, buying a used Game Gear is risky. When these were being produced, bad capacitors were rampant in the electronics industry. If you have a Game Gear that gets poor video or no sound, this is why. Now, as I said before, the Game Gear had quite a few accessories, maybe too many. So let's take a look at a few. First up is the Sega TV Tuner. This thing would allow you to watch television on your Game Gear. Now today television is all digital, so this thing is pretty much useless now, but it does have an audio-video in port right here on top. So your Game Gear could act as a television. If you wanted to, you could play your Xbox 360 on your Game Gear. Wow. The antenna is also ridiculously long. Next is the Master Gear Converter. The Game Gear could play Master System games with this accessory attached. It's a nice option to have, although the Game Gear's library is pretty large on its own. Next we have the Game Gear Battery Pack. As I said before, the Game Gear had pretty poor battery life. So this battery pack you could clip onto your belt and give you extended gaming on the go. Now these are just a few accessories, but there were a bunch more. You've got the Power Back, which gave the system more battery life, the Super Wide Gear, which magnified the screen, the gear-to-gear cable, which was just a link cable so you could play multiplayer games with another Game Gear, and a car adapter, which would let you charge your system in a car's cigarette lighter. The Game Gear was the closest competitor for the Game Boy, and even it wasn't very close. It sold about 11 million units total, compared to the Game Boy's 118 million. While the Game Gear did have advantages over the Nintendo's handheld, many gamers could not get past the negatives. The battery life was very poor, and some gamers found it too big and bulky. It was also more expensive than the Game Boy. But one big negative was the lack of third-party support. When it was initially released, Sega churned out a bunch of titles for the system. They even packaged the Game Gear with columns to compete with the Game Boy and Tetris. But Sega hoped third-party developers would step up and deliver great games for the system. And few did. The best games on the system were developed by Sega. In 1997, knowing they couldn't keep up, Sega discontinued the system, right when the Pokemon craze had begun on the Game Boy. However, there is still a loyal following for the Game Gear. In 2000, Majesco got permission to re-release the console. It had a few cosmetic changes, and the TV Tuner and Master Gear converter did not work, but it was an overall improvement over the original. The screen was much better quality, and the battery life was also increased. Game Gear titles have recently become available for download on the Nintendo 3DS. The emulation is perfect, and has some really fun options to play around with. If you're looking to add to your video game collection, the Game Gear is easy to start collecting. The system itself is rather inexpensive, as are most of the games. That's all for this episode of The Gaming Historian. Thanks for watching.